Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, October 1st, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, today, the first day of October, also marks the beginning of the month of the Rosary. There's also a number of movable feasts. In other words, they change days. One is the patronage of Our Lady, which we're told can be in October or November. Also, Notre Dame du Cap, which is celebrated the first Sunday in October. And also the first Sunday of October, they celebrate in the city of Jauja, in Junín, in Peru, La Virgen del Rosario, known in the Quechua language as Mamanch Rosario or Mamalanquic Rosario, which means like Mama Rosario, like Mother of the Rosary, Mama of the Rosary in their language. Also, in Spain, we're told that on the first Sunday of October, they celebrate in the Real Basilica de Nuestra Señora de Antocha. They celebrate La Virgen de Antocha. So what do they celebrate on today, October 1st? Well, first off, Our Lady, Queen and Protectress of Nigeria. She's celebrated in Benin City in Edo State in Nigeria. Also, they celebrate the holy protection of the Mother of God. And this one they'll also celebrate, we'll mention it later in the month of October, but that's because the calendar changed at a certain point. So the history of this feast is, it's got a history in the Byzantine Catholic Church as well as in the Orthodox liturgy. We're told that in the year 911, so 911, when Constantinople was besieged, Saint Andrew of Constantinople saw Mary, John the Baptist, and John the Theologian enter a church in Constantinople. She spread her cloak over the congregation as a symbol of protection, we're told, and the city was spared. Likewise, the Abbot Orsini tells us that today they recall the foundation of the Abbé de la Couronne of the Order of St. Augustine in the Diocese of Angoulême under the patronage of Our Lady. And this was done by Lambert, who was its first abbot in the year 1122. Likewise, when we go to Greece, this I think is probably, he's celebrated in the Orthodox Church, but that's okay. The Panagia Koukouzelissa in Great Lavra in Mount Athos, which is in Greece. So it begins with the story of Saint John, this is for the Orthodox Church, Saint John Koukouzelissa, who died in 1360. He was born in Bulgaria, educated in Constantinople, and was a singer at the court of the Byzantine Emperor. But he gave that position up to become a monk on Mount Athos. Remember, Mount Athos was this very beautiful and important monastery. For a long time, he just took care of their animals, and so he only sang to them, and apparently they would gather around him to listen. But once his talent was discovered, he was given the head place in the choir. The story is told that once, after a long singing session during the vigil of the Akanathistos hymn, which is a song in praise of Our Lady, he just fell asleep. And so the Virgin appeared to him in a dream and said, "Sing for me, and I will not abandon you." And she placed a golden coin in his hand. He woke up to find himself holding the coin. So then John Koukouzelissa became one of the great hymnographers, or writers of sacred music, in the Orthodox Church. He is celebrated today on October 1st. Likewise, they also celebrate the Grada Bunda Maria Anai Velangkani, in Medan, North Sumatra, in Indonesia. That shrine was opened in 2005. Likewise, they also celebrate Our Lady of Czestochowa, but this is in Garfield Heights in Ohio. That shrine was blessed in 1939. And lastly, they celebrate in Resato in Brescia in Lombardy in Italy an apparition of Madonna di Valverde, which there's multiple apparitions that are attributed to her. One was in 1399, another in 1711. We're told that, in short, this today recalls the apparition to a brave farmer who was plowing in his field near a little church dedicated to Our Lady. Suddenly, he saw in front of him Jesus Christ, who was very angry because of the evil of the Christian people. But through the intercession of the Blessed Mary, he was able to obtain mercy. So that is what we're celebrating today in the Marian world on October 1st. For today's reading from True Devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary by St. Louis de Montfort, we continue with part 1 on devotion to Our Blessed Lady in general, and then we're in section 2, discernment of the true devotion to Our Blessed Lady, wherein we're considering 5 fundamental truths. Yesterday we read through point 70, and if you recall, that talked about different sorts of slavery, right? Louis de Montfort said there's a slavery of nature, a slavery of constraint, and a slavery of the will. He said all creatures are slaves in the first sense, because by nature they are subjected to God. A slavery of consent, that's the demons and the damned, right? They have no choice. And there's also a slavery of the will, which is that of the just and the saints, right? And that's the one that he said is most glorious to God, right? Because he says, by that slavery, we make choice of God and his service above all things. So for today, we start with point 71, which has 5 subpoints under it. He says, there is an entire difference between a servant and a slave. The first point, a slave does not give all he is, all that he has, and all he can acquire by himself or by another to his master. But the slave gives himself whole and entire to his master, all that he has and all he can gain, without any exception. Point 2. The servant exacts wages for his services, which he performs for his master, but a slave can exact nothing. Whatever assiduity, whatever industry, whatever energy he may have at his work, right? So the slave doesn't get rewarded for what he does, whereas the servant does. The third point, the servant can leave his master when he pleases, or at least when the time of his service shall be expired. But the slave has no right to quit his master at his will. The fourth point, the master of the servant has no right of life and death over him, so that if he kill him like one of his beasts of burdens, he would commit an unjust homicide. But the master of the slave has, by the law, a right of life or death over him, so that he may sell him to anybody he likes or kill him, as if he stood on the same level as one of his horses. Of course, we don't approve of human slavery now, but again, he's drawing a comparison because we want to talk about why we would profess slavery to the Blessed Virgin Mary. Fifth, and lastly, the servant is only for a time in his master's service. The slave is for always. Point 72. There is nothing among men which makes us belong to another more than slavery. There is nothing among Christians which makes us more absolutely belong to Jesus Christ and his Holy Mother than the slavery of the will. Again, that's where we choose to give ourselves to Jesus Christ. According to the example of Jesus Christ himself, who took on him the form of a slave for love of us, formam servi accipiens, which is from Scripture, and also according to the example of the Holy Virgin, who is called the servant and the slave of the Lord. The apostle calls himself, as by a title of honor, servus Christi, the slave of Christ. Christians are often called in the Holy Scriptures servi Christi, slaves of Christ, which word servus, as a great man has truly remarked, signified in old times nothing but a slave, because there were no servants like those of the present day. Masters were served only either by slaves or by freedmen. It is this which the Catechism of the Council of Trent, in order to leave no doubt about our being slaves of Jesus Christ, expresses with an unequivocal term in calling us mancipia Christi, slaves of Jesus Christ.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.